at some more of the wishes we got on the wishing tree last night. One very nice wish from someone who wrote, "I wish my children don't have to fight for good working conditions when they get into the labour market. I hope that occupational safety and health is taken for granted." Somebody else wrote, "I wish for everyone to have a fulfilled past, an exciting present, and a bright future." So that's one you can take away with you, I think. Someone else has very kindly written, "I wish for peace in Ukraine." I have another one here. Someone wrote, "I wish I could find the 10 missing headsets for the interpreters." I wonder who wrote that. So, okay, we're going to move on now to our keynote speaker and to our panel discussion. And with this panel discussion, what we would like to do is to introduce the topic of our next campaign on digitalization without neglecting the topic of our summit on musculoskeletal disorders. And of course, we can easily make the link between digitalization, artificial intelligence, and the #1 work-related problem, musculoskeletal disorders. So during the discussions we will have in the panel, we will talk probably a lot about stress, psychosocial risks associated with artificial intelligence. And of course, let me remind you, as my colleague Malgosia mentioned earlier, and as we all know, that musculoskeletal disorders are multifactorial in their origins. Yesterday, in the parallel session 3, the links between psychosocial risks stemming from the digitalization of workplace and MSDs were clearly articulated. So I suppose the umbrella message of our forthcoming campaign on digitalization is digital technologies are safe, they are healthy and productive if designed, implemented, managed, and used in line with the human-centered approach. So let's try to see if we can tease out some of those issues in the next hour or so. I will introduce you to the panel a little later. But first, to update us on his latest research and stimulate our debate, I'm delighted to introduce you to our keynote guest today, Professor Adrian Todoli, Professor of Labour Law from the University of Valencia, who is working extensively in the area of regulating the digital economy from a legal and economic perspective. He is widely published in the areas of platform work, algorithmic management, and artificial intelligence. And I remind you, and remind all our online viewers, you can submit your questions online. They will pop up on the screen in front of me. And of course here, you simply raise your hand and we'll have a microphone to you. So enjoy the next hour or so. I hope, I have a feeling it's going to be very interesting. I hope you'll find it as interesting as well. So please welcome to the stage for your keynote address, Professor Adrian Todoli.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me here today. For me, it's really an honor to be here. Thank you. And as you can read, I'm going to talk about algorithms and about safety and occupational risks. There are a lot of discussion about algorithms taking our jobs, but actually, I'm more concerned about the jobs are going to remain under an algorithm as a boss or as artificial intelligence as a boss. Today, this is something that is already happened. The algorithm is deciding who is hired, who gets the best schedule, who is promoted, who gets a bonus, and who won't, and what is the correct intensity on the work, which is the pace for working. And of course, the algorithms are deciding who gets fired. Amazon, for example, uses a chip on the worker's boot to measure the numbers of steps that a warehouse worker makes every day. So if you stop to go to the bathroom or to talk to a colleague worker, the algorithm will know it. But that is not even the main concern. The main problem is that these steps are used to make a productivity index on the company in order to compete one worker against another, like on a race. Indeed, workers are informed of their individual position on this ranking. So the worker with less steps on the day knows that the next day he or she have to run or could be fired. Actually, if you fell below minimum of steps on the day, you will receive a warning on your smartphone or on your smartwatch. Send it automatically by the algorithm. And even you could have a dismissal notice made automatically by the algorithm. So the algorithm, as I said, today is firing workers. Actually, on a report says that Amazon, 20% of the Amazon workforce are fired because these productivity algorithms. Of course, this has consequences on the health and occupational risk. This has a direct on health and safety consequence. On this report says that they found that Amazon has, on average, 50% more accidents and injuries than the rest of the company of the sector. So, with this challenge, today I'm going to focus on 3 points. First, what are the main uses of the algorithm management of workers? Then, what are the main consequences of having an algorithm of an artificial intelligence as a boss? And the third point, I'm going to finish trying to say what we can do about it. There has been a very speedy evolution about new technologies being the substitution of the middle management. In this evolution, algorithms are the last step. On the last decade, the human resources or the supervisors on a company, they had an incredible amount of new sources of information about workers. But the problem of the last decade was that there was so much data that it was not useful for supervisors or for the human resources team of a company. For example, having video cameras everywhere on the company, if you also need one person to see each camera or to see the cameras, maybe it's not that useful because this supervising is expensive. Here is where the algorithms have shown very useful. The algorithms could analyze hours of recording and only inform the human supervisor what should look for the precise second at the recording, saving a lot of money on supervisory hours. The same is for recruiting. Today, there are a lot of sources for having more candidates on a company, but if the company has to see all the CVs, this is not useful, it's too much. But today, the companies are using algorithmic management in order to decide which CVs should be arriving to the table of the supervisor or the human resources team. Research says that today, 72% of all the CVs never are seen by human eyes. The algorithms are discarding the great majority of the CVs even before they arrive to the table or to the computer of a human being. At telework, or just when you work with a computer, happens the same. There is no use if a human supervisor receives, for example, all the information of all the workers on the company that a worker has pressed 2,000 times the keyboard and 1,000 times movement of the mouse. This information is not useful, but it's much more useful if the algorithm processes any action made by the worker with the computer and then give the supervisor just a productivity index. And it's even more useful if this productivity index is ranked for all the workers on the companies. Now the supervisor can very easily fire just the last one on the ranking. They don't have to make a lot of questions or make a lot of work trying to find out who is the best or who is the worst worker on the company. Just he or she just need to see the ranking. Of course, the problem is if the ranking is good or bad, this is for another point, because there are a lot of problems with discrimination and other things. But this is not what I'm focusing today, because I'm focusing on health and not on discrimination and the consequence of these rankings. The thing is, for health and occupational risk, it doesn't matter even if the ranking is good, the productivity index is good, it's truthful or not, because the important thing is if the company made decision based on the ranking, the behavior of the workers are going to change. At call centers, algorithms are used to monitor every call made by the call center workers. The algorithm is monitoring vocabulary used, politeness, even empathy of the workers on the call. Because of the tone of the voice and the words used, the algorithm rank workers on a call center on empathy. At the end, now again, the algorithm will decide on a ranking who maintained the job and who is fired. In big hotels with wearables, the algorithm decides how many seconds a room cleaner needs to make a bed or to clean a toilet. The optimal time is decided on average or all the cleaning workers of the hotel. Once the optimal time is decided by the algorithm, if the cleaning lady exceeded the time stipulated by the algorithm, her smart watch will vibrate to let her know that she is on a delay. This vibration is what the literature has called a digital wimp. It's a constant psychological reminder that the worker has to go faster. Of course, the slowest one will be fired after a time automatically. The algorithm will send a firing letter to the slowest one. The thing is that the dismissal of the slowest one will raise the optimal, because it's how statistic works. If you make the optimal time on average, if you dismissal the slowest one, the optimal time or the time decided by the algorithm will increase. Well, and everything I already said happens without human intervention or the opportunity to talk to your manager as a worker, because the manager won't talk back, because it's an algorithm. I don't know if you have tried to argue with a toaster, but it's not possible. I see that in the public, in the audience, there are some freaks as me. Well, the thing is about, we already seen examples of uses, and now I'm going to go through consequence. I'm going just to point out one thing. I'm not going to talk about this, but the thing is, for me, the algorithms won't take your jobs, they will take your salary. I'm not going to develop this argument because I don't have time, but I really think that the problems of algorithms, apart from the problems from health and occupational risk, there are a big issue that algorithms are decreasing the bargaining power of workers because of discrimination of union members and because a lot of other reasons that I don't have time to develop now, but then if you have questions, and of course I will be happy to develop on these things. I'm going to focus on what we are all here today, which is risk factors for workers. Algorithms means constant monitoring, intensification of work. This is the main thing what we already seen in these examples. The pace of work is going to be increased because of the algorithms. Micromanagement and lack of autonomy because the algorithm is going to see everything and decide on everything. Then, of course, as I said, there are problems of biases and discrimination, which can be a problem also for psychological risks. Lack of empathy, like, you know, the toaster. Lack of empathy of the algorithm, and problems of malfunctions. I'm going to give just some examples. In Australia, an agency made a report figuring out why riders, the delivery guys on bicycles, suffer more faints because of the heat when they were managed by an algorithm than when they were managed by a human supervisor. And the answer were the algorithm. The answer were because the riders, when they are managed by an algorithm, they go by the route the GPS decided. And this GPS do not take into account the temperature, the warm, and whether there is shades or not in the route. When the rider is not controlled by the algorithm, he or she can decide the route, and they go by the shades, they go by the shadow because of the temperatures. The thing is that these workers asked about why they went by the sun and not by the shade. They said that it was because the GPS said that, and they were afraid that they were fired automatically if they are not taking that route. The thing is, the company, they were not firing people because they decided, the worker decide their own route, but as the workers don't even know of that. They only know that there are a possibility that the algorithms is firing automatically, and they don't know the causes of being fired. They know that all other colleagues are being fired automatically because of the algorithms, and you cannot reply to the algorithm. You cannot justify, you cannot ask the reason. The workers are thinking that everything can be a fireable offense. So they are afraid, and only the imagination of being fired because they are using another route than the one given by the GPS, they decided to comply with that, even if they are not for sure that they are going to be fired if they choose another way to go. So the thing is, they are exposing to health risk even without knowing if this is necessary to do the work, if this is a fireable offense, changing the route, just because they don't have information enough. Uber drivers happen the same. Uber drivers, they do not complain when passenger is smoking because of the reputational system. Again, they are afraid to say to the passenger, please, sir, madam, in this car is not allowed because the law is not allowed to smoke. Taxi drivers do that, but Uber drivers don't do that, won't do that because of the reputational system. They are afraid of having a bad reputation and then be fired automatically by the algorithm. So the power given to the customers to evaluate workers is especially dangerous. As in Black Mirror episode, as you see, I really liked the science fiction television, also books. And I think it's a good way to see the reality, because in this episode you can see the problems of reputational systems, but the digital reputation of workers are everywhere. And the problem is not only that the customer can rate you, the problem is also that the algorithm is going to fire you automatically. This means you cannot complain to the algorithm. You cannot explain yourself even. For example, a report from FEPS discovered that riders under a reputational system suffer more sexual harassment than riders without reputational systems, riders on traditional economy. The reason behind it is simple. First, man with this kind of power of giving a bad reputation can abuse of that, asking for some sexual advancement, or just asking to go inside the house in order to leave the pizza on the kitchen. In traditional economy, the rider would probably say, sorry, sir, I cannot go inside your home to deliver the pizza. I have to give it here. I have to give you on the door. But under a reputational system, under an algorithmic management, they are so afraid that they have no problem to go inside because, well, they have problems, but they can't do anything. They are afraid of losing the job, so they comply with these asks. So then this is an exposition of risks. Not only, of course, not only psychological risk, but also physical risk. So, what can we do about this? These are some risks, and I think we should do something about that. To finish my presentation, I will discuss some actions in order to try to solve these problems. But before that, I have something to confess, is that I am a techno-optimist. Despite all I said today, I do not think that we have to forbid the use of algorithms, but to regulate its negative outcomes. So for doing that, I propose a specific European directive on occupational and safety of workers working under algorithm. A regulation that is able to protect workers, but letting companies to use these algorithms even as a substitute of middle management. This directive should make compulsory to all companies using algorithm to manage workers to make an assessment of a specific risk to be aware of them. Of course, we can say, well, this is also on a directive. Every company has to do an evaluation or an assessment of the risk. But the thing is that some risks are I would say, invisible, that I think it's better to put it on a specific directive. of course, this wouldn't be the first specific directive on health and occupational risk. There are a lot of them, and I think EA exposed enough risks, and it's very new, so we should regulate it in a specific way. Also, the directive should make compulsory to design algorithms to do not harm, as Isaac Asimov told us. The thing is, we should focus not only in the results of the application of the algorithm, but also on how algorithm is programmed. This is a key difference between the normal regulation. But I think it's not too different because, for example, in a traditional company, the law, the directive, make compulsory to give training to the supervisor in order to, the supervisor has enough knowledge in order to reduce health problems on the workplace. So designing the artificial intelligence in order to do not harm to workers would be the same idea of giving training to a specific training on health and occupational risk to a supervisor. It could be the same, but I think it should put it on a specific directive, because otherwise can not be applied by the companies. And just to finish, two more things. This directive should make compulsory a human in command and give the right to the worker to ask for human intervention and the opportunity to the worker to understand the decision to be reviewed by human. Most of the research made until now says that the main problem for psychological risk is the thing that the algorithm is firing people automatically without giving the opportunity to explain themselves to the workers. Because if they would have the opportunity, they would be less stressed, of course, and the behavior would be more mindful on the safety issues if it could be the possibility to explain themselves in case they are fired. But with automatically firing, for the mind of the worker is, I need to complain with everything because otherwise I will have no second chance. There will be no second opportunity to even have the opportunity to explain myself. And at the end, after a great deal of study, I did a lot of research on this, about the perils of algorithms for discrimination in gender and union discrimination and health and occupational risk, I think it should be, all algorithms should be auditable. Or maybe not all algorithms, but the algorithms to expose really problems should be audited by a specialist ET group or or just people who knows how to audit this kind of algorithms. Well, this is what I had to say today. Thank you very much, and I hope you like it.
Thank you. Thank you. So, thank you very much, Professor Todoli. They say a good keynote speech should be controversial. And I have a sense that you have given us a lot to think about and that it will stimulate the debate. So now let me introduce to you our panel who are going to discuss this and other topics. Sitting beside Professor Todoli, we have Nader Ahmadi, who is the Director General of the Swedish Agency for Work Environment Expertise. It's a government agency working with research and information on the work environment. It's also interesting for us to have him here because, of course, as you know, Sweden will take over the presidency of the European Union on the 1st of January next. So we know there are some preparations going on there. We might hear about them later. We also have Charlotte Greyfors Erno, a fellow Swede. She is no stranger to the agency, and as many of you know, she heads up the European Commission's Health and Safety Unit, which is based in Luxembourg. And then, representing the European social partners, we have Marianne Skapman and Christa Meester. Marianne is the head of the Health and Safety and Working Conditions Unit of the European Trade Union Institute. And Chris is the chairman of the Health and Safety Working Group of Business Europe, the Union of Industrial and Employers Confederations of Europe. And the good professor has also agreed to sit with us in case he needs to defend some of his statements there during the panel, who knows. Just for you to know, it's quite interesting. We have listeners and viewers from all over Europe with us today, or more than 200. And we also have viewers from India, from Taiwan, from Kazakhstan. So it's really nice to welcome you as well from far-flung places to the beautiful city of Bilbao. So now let's get the ball rolling. And Charlotte, I guess we're going to start with you. And I guess you saw that coming. There's been quite some talk about regulation in the area. And I know that the strategic framework on occupational safety and health in Europe, published in June of 2021, wasn't it? In their member states have been encouraged to take various actions, but also the Commission has pledged to take some actions. What, in your view, are the arguments for regulation, and in which areas do you see this occurring?
Thank you very much, Brenda, for the question, and good morning to all. I'm really pleased to be here in this panel together with so distinguished speakers on this very, very interesting topic. And I think when we heard Professor Todoli that it's really something which is so important and really new. And again, I can only congratulate the agency and the management board of the agency who decided to choose digitalization for the next campaign, because it's obvious that so many things are changing, they are changing fast, and this is indeed what was also identified in the strategic framework that you mentioned, Brenda, that we adopted from the Commission side last year in June. It's difficult to regulate in such a fast-changing area. But it doesn't mean that we should not try and that we should not think about how to go about it. And therefore, this is exactly what the Commission did last year already in April by putting forward a proposal to a regulation laying down harmonized rules on artificial intelligence. And this proposal for regulation, it covers all aspects of artificial intelligence. So it's not specific for occupational safety and health, but that part is also taken up. And here I did not prepare as nice slides as the professor, but I would like you to imagine a pyramid, like a triangle. So this regulation actually divides artificial intelligence in 4 layers. So on the top of the pyramid, we have the unacceptable algorithms that just cannot be put on the market because they are considered too dangerous. And here I'm thinking, for example, about toys, dangerous toys for children. Encouraging them to do things that are just too dangerous. Then we come to the layer which are high-risk algorithm and artificial intelligence. And there is the part on employment and indeed some of the examples that the professor was talking about. Then we have the minimal risk, the limited risks, and the minimal risks. So the idea with this proposal is to categorize the different artificial intelligence systems, and then, depending in what category they fall, there are a lot of different actions that are triggered. Now, this is a regulation that was put forward, and it is now under negotiation with Council and with Parliament. And we know in our area of health and safety at work that many things can happen in the trilogues and the co-legislator negotiations. So I cannot inform you anymore in the details about how that develops, but for certain it's advancing, and it's definitely an initiative to keep your eyes on.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. I have a feeling we're going to be coming back to this topic in a moment. Nadir, we heard there that it's very difficult to regulate something that is so fast changing and so in a world that is rapidly changing. In your research work, have you identified big gaps in our knowledge? Are you worried about that?
Yes, we are. Thank you very much for the word, and hello to everybody. And thank you, Professor Todoli, for a very inspiring speech. I give you some general remarks, and then I will point out to some concrete gaps in this area. The surveys that we have been carrying out at our agency in Sweden, they show clearly that there are large knowledge gaps surrounding the impact of artificial intelligence and algorithm on the work environment. There are very few research about how the design of algorithms impact the work environment physically, organizationally, socially, and cognitively. There is lack of analysis of juridical, as you mentioned, ethical and philosophical aspects of the introduction of algorithms. Research shows everywhere that there is a built-in problematic regarding what is technologically possible and what is meaningful or desirable to achieve. These are very important questions that often are neglected. What is the point? Why should we develop algorithms, and to which extent? The existing research is primarily of a basic technical nature and leaves all these questions behind. About the concrete knowledge gaps, one issue that we see is lacking largely. It's the gender perspective and equal opportunities. They are absent from almost all existing knowledge today. Also, there is not enough research on how algorithms and artificial intelligence impacts the work environment in terms of grounds for discrimination, such as ethnicity, skin color, religion, and etc. Normally, we see that it's masculinity and whiteness norms that are affecting the design of algorithms in terms of safety and function. There are a lot of examples. For instance, when we are talking about algorithms in the healthcare, they are always referred to as she. They are female. And also the facial recognition is based on a white color skin. So the question for the research is how we can design algorithms for an inclusive working life, and how do we use algorithms to create a good working environment for everybody. The second point that the research shows is that algorithms affect different categories of employees differently. Some become more effective and learn how to benefit of algorithms' potentials, while others find their own competencies outdated and feel being insufficient, which can lead to techno-stress and other forms of stress at job. Employees must be given the possibility to acquire necessary competencies so that they can have control about the new systems. We can also, as a third point, observe that the development of algorithms has had a rapid pace, and legislation and regulation, as you mentioned, and audits and labor inspections are lagging behind. An important juridical issue in this context is the question who, the human or the machine, is responsible for the consequences if something goes wrong, an accident happens or somebody gets hurt. Who has the authority over whom? Who has the right and possibility to take over and lead in a risky situation? For the time being, there are no answers to these questions, and we get some information that normally we tend to rely on the machines more than we rely on humans. As the fourth point, there is also need for competency building among those who promote and create these new technologies, algorithms, and about the potential problems for work environment among these people. Also, human relation departments, health providing, care providing agencies at the workplaces, and the managers also. They must have good knowledge about the consequences of using algorithms and how to create a good work environment. And finally, of course, we are all happy about new technologies, and we heard yesterday also from the trade unions, they are proud of about these changes and developments. And we see the possibilities for higher efficiency, productivity, through many measurements and better control of work processes. However, these control mechanisms can be detrimental to the psychosocial health of the workers. So it's important to do research about the attitudes towards algorithms and artificial intelligence, to see how workers feel, how their feelings of trust is when they are working with the algorithm. You know, the workers, the employees, they must understand on which basis the decisions and recommendations from the algorithms are done, and they must also have the right to interpret them. So the question is the question of feeling of having control about their works. And these are the questions that research has not answered up to today. And there are certainly much more questions, but I limit myself to these 5.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have a lot of questions online, and I'm looking around here. I'll take some from the audience as well. Put your hand up or shout, and we'll find you with a microphone. For those people interested online, yes, all the presentations will be made available on the campaign website in a very short time after this summit ends. I would imagine in the next days you'll be able to find them all. Quite a lot of compliments for your presentation, Professor Todoli, and I have 2 questions for you, but first I want to hear from the other members of the panel. I'll come back to you. So, Chris de Meester from Business Europe. I guess you've got a few things to say, a few things on your mind. I do wonder, you know, we have all talked about the benefits of digitalization as well. Do you want to tell us more about them? And also, the other question I was thinking about asking you is, can we regulate in a human-centered way?
Okay, yeah, thank you, and good morning. I can still say, I guess, to all of you. First of all, Brenda, allow me to briefly come back to the keynote speech. You know, I like a bit of controversy in a presentation, but in this case, I must say that I really am shocked. A professor blaming and shaming individual companies without counter-speech, not even based on facts, because a lot of what he said was simply urban legends that we know for years already, that they are urban legends and not facts. I find that simply unethical. A professor is also, you know, most of you know I'm also a photographer, a professor using unlicensed, copyrighted, protected images in his presentation. That is simply not done. So officially, I can tell you now that I will reach out to the companies that were named and to their business associations to file an official complaint with university. Going back, really, I'm shocked about that. Our chairman of our Belgian Fund on Occupational Diseases and Accidents has a saying, and he always says, if you feed bullshit in a debate or in a database, only bullshit will come out. Excuse me for the words. So now going back to your question, Brenda, and sorry for that, I'd like to take a look at the global picture, and that global picture is work needs to be organized, an organization of work that is about allocating people and resources to tasks according to the capacities, the knowledge, and the capacities of individuals. Tasks are allocated, a structure is created, you work in teams, or you have a flat organization, or more hierarchical. And the goal is, of course, to achieve organizational objectives. You want outcome, and the workers, of course, contribute to that, and they benefit from that because we are talking about not forced labor, but about paid work. Now, how you organize that, almost all of the aspects, the work process you need, the planning, all of that, the follow-up, the evaluation, all of that, or almost everything there, is based on some kind of social dialogue. When it comes to work organization, you have the works councils that are informed, and depending on which country you're in, they have a bigger say in that, and sometimes even it's co-decision. You have to reach agreement. The health and safety aspects, information and consultation of workers is guaranteed by European directives, by member states' laws, and again, in some countries, this goes very far because you go to the level of reaching agreement. So what kind of tools you use, whether that is now humans, supervisors, external experts, or digital tools, that doesn't matter because the focus should be about reaching organizational objectives and at the same time respecting the whole framework, working time, health and safety, transparent working conditions, the pay obligations, all of that has to be respected and is embedded and framed in laws. But as I said, the actual tools, we never looked at that. Have we ever evaluated the human thinking, maybe the biased thinking of a supervisor or somebody that was hiring people? No. But we have the whole process around it to make sure when there is a derogation, when there is discrimination, when there is people excluded, when there is no tolerance for people with a health condition or maybe a handicap, the whole picture that I showed you is there to get it back in line. So I do not think that starting to look into the exact programming of algorithms, how they function, that is going to be of any help at all. Most companies, and I guess almost all who were award winners in this ceremony, I'm pretty sure they all use software and other tools and programs to shape, build, and improve, continuously improve their health and safety management system, including OIRA. The OIRA tools are full of algorithms. Are they transparent to the end user? I don't think so. Were they co-designed with every single worker or supervisor or employer using them? No. Do we think they are better? Do we think they are good? Do we think they are there to improve health and safety at work? Yes. So going back to the actual topic of algorithms, but I guess it's not so much about algorithms, but about what Charlotte was talking about, artificial intelligence. I think that is the core of the discussion. Here, what I would like to underline is that social partners in Europe, not long ago, in 2020, we concluded an autonomous framework agreement on digitalization that has a chapter on artificial intelligence. I was the negotiator for the employers in a very constructive way, in a very constructive and open debate with my colleagues from the trade unions. I think we have a masterpiece of an agreement there because it is a process-based agreement. It takes into account the fact that technology is continuously changing. It takes into account the fact that maybe techniques, maybe some algorithms or whatever program of tomorrow, we can still handle it through the process that was designed. And I repeat it was about aiming for a jointly, I stress this, managed process, jointly managed by workers and employers, to take into account from the design stage all the aspects of artificial intelligence algorithms, because the aim is that they contribute to the bigger picture achievement of organizational goals while respecting health and safety, transparency, discrimination, etc., etc. So for me, that is the most important element. We have the tool there, and I hope that any future legislation is inspired by that tool and takes up the principles that we jointly built in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Marion, we've been looking a little bit at the work of the European Trade Union Institute, and you've done a lot in this area, haven't you? What are your thoughts about what we're currently discussing?
Thank you, Brenda. And thank you for having me here, for the invitation. It's always a great pleasure to be in Bilbao in the agency. And also thank you to the Professor Todoli for your presentation. I also want to thank you that you made your presentation very tangible by using a lot of examples. And I think those examples are very telling. They make it tangible, they make it visible, it's possible immediately to imagine what algorithmic management does. And now coming to your question, Brenda, indeed we did a lot on the topic of, well, actually on psychosocial risks, but I think algorithmic management, we also saw that in the article of the professor that is underlying his speech, the algorithmic management is all about psychosocial risks. Now, we did a report on exposure to psychosocial risks factors in the gig economy. And this is a systematic review of all literature on psychosocial risk factors of platform work. And here, this is actually, it can be seen as a pre-taste of what is going to happen and what is already happening in many other sectors. Because platform work is the only example, to my knowledge, of total algorithmic management. It's totally reigned by algorithmic management. And I'm very sorry to be negative about this, but it's not a nice picture that we get from that. This has been a systematic review, so it's based on facts, and the main conclusions are that constant monitoring and automated managerial techniques contribute to an increasingly hectic pace of work, a lack of trust towards the platform, and pronounced power asymmetries. So, so this example is not very positive. And of course, it's important to think about what can we do about it, because I see in the presentation of Professor Todoli, on the one hand, these also quite negative examples. On the other hand, I hear him express his optimism. I'm maybe less optimistic, but I'm always open to other opinions and to come to another conviction. How to deal with these risks? I think what I think is really important here is to see them as occupational health and safety risk and to keep that in mind. And then analyze what kind of risk are we talking about. It's psychosocial risks. So this is the context that we are speaking about. So then speak about regulation. How to regulate OSH risks, work-related psychosocial risks. My conviction is that it should be regulated in the realm of the OSH acquis. So it's OSH regulation, regulated in the OSH acquis. About the Artificial Intelligence Act and also about the Platform Work Act. Those acts, of course, contribute to health and safety as well. Certain elements, however, are being overlooked, and that is typical when OSH is taken on board in another silo. It's often forgotten, some elements. I can't go into detail, but there's work on that as well. Then, in order to be able to regulate, we need to understand the risks, and we also need to understand what kind of measures do we need to regulate this, to improve the system, because what I see is that we take algorithmic management as a given. So it's there, it's probably not going to disappear. It has come over us. It's already there. We are just running behind. We are trying to regulate it while it's being already deeply implemented in society, in work. So how to do it? It's important to have an image of what measures are necessary, and then Professor Todoli says, okay, planning the algorithm, programming the algorithm is an important element. Take into account all OSH elements. I totally think that is true. I also want to say that it may not be so easy to do it in the right way. And there's one other element that we have to take into account, and I'm really curious about your opinion also on this, that there is algorithms that are planned and that have predictable outcomes, but there are also algorithms that include machine learning. So they are being programmed, but they learn themselves. At some point in time, we don't know what is in there. So that's a question. So programming algorithms, another very important element that I want to put forward is that is coming out of all the research, also the research that we did at EQI, is if we want to make human-centered algorithmic management, we need humans. So, the professor also mentioned it, it must be possible to consult, to explain to a superior why you did this and that. And that is also actually a very, very important element of organizational trust. I have the feeling that you want maybe to have some other questions.
No, I'm very interested in what you're saying, Marianne.
Yeah, well then,
no,
finally, it's also important to realize how are we going to, what do we mean by being able to consult a human? So it's important, and how do we guarantee that the workers actually have this access to a human in a proper way, that it's not just a rule out there. And of course, in that respect, enforcement is very important. And enforcement, as we all know, is not the strongest point of OSH regulation. It is something that, enforcement entities are already overburdened, so it's not very easy to do that. I think I leave it to this.
Okay, thank you, Marianne. I'm going to give the professor a right to reply in a moment, but we've got a couple of questions here online, and it's also come up here, I think. And I'd like to ask both the Commission and our friend from the Swedish Institute, how can digital technology be used for prevention? Well, I think
Shall
in
we
Sweden,
reply
yeah,
together?
I think in Sweden there has been some research done on this about using it for a positive as a positive way, and I was wondering if you'd just like to elaborate a little bit on that.
Now, of course, the digital technologies, the artificial intelligence, they can definitely contribute to avoiding harms and human injuries. I mean, all the simulations, the visualizations, and the virtual reality, they allow development and evaluation of a safe environment without risking life. So they can, and they are also partially used to develop better decision-making systems that will promote the organization of ergonomically sustainable work. They can measure the workload individually or collectively, and they can send warnings to the employee and to the employer. But the point is that the algorithm should work assistive when identifying an ergonomic problem or a work environment program. The bottom line is that, I mean, the algorithm, there is no discussion. It's future, it's development, and there are a lot of potentials. And maybe when we discuss them from the research point of view, we always raise the critical issues, the negative maybe issues, but that's the task of the research, to think critically and then to show the gaps and the problems. So they have definitely many positive aspects for the working life, but the point is that if they are introduced unconditionally and without critical thinking, they might be accompanied by OSH risks. So my general standpoint is that the new systems involving algorithms should be designed to strengthen humans' intelligence instead of replacing them. This is an important thing we should remember.
Yeah. Charlotte?
Yes, and then from my side, and speaking then from the EU perspective, of course, and Chris, you already mentioned, the success story of the agency, which is digital tools like OIRA. No? This is really what cornerstone when it comes to prevention, the risk assessment to help employers, and OIRA and related tools are really, I think, an excellent example on how digital tools can be used in a positive and helpful way.
Thank you. For those of you not familiar, OIRA is the online interactive risk assessment tool that we have developed in the agency. So, Professor Todoli, I have a question for you from our online viewer, and you may also respond if you wish to anything else that's been said. Is it possible to design a healthy master algorithm in artificial intelligence that could protect us and immunize us from the long list of occupational risks we face?
Thank you very much. Well, first to say that I understand that the colleague for Business Europe don't like that I use names. I completely understand, but I think it's part of my job to inform people, specialized people, about what are the examples. And I think giving real examples is a better way to give lectures to formate people. And of course, I have sources for everything I said. And I understand that he don't like, but I think trying to censorship a professor, I think is too much. I think we have, actually the good thing is that I have a PhD on law, so I know something about rights, and I know freedom of speech for professors are quite strong.
And copyright law is no problem.
Sorry?
Copyright law, that's no problem.
No, but there are exceptions in intellectual property for professors. There are exceptions, special exceptions. I mean, I know that, and I can I know that I can use it. And of course, as I said, I understand that we have different opinions on that, and I don't want to make any conflict on that. It's my opinion that it's good to use it, and I think the law protects professors to do that. Apart from that, answering the question, I think so. I think there is a way to program an algorithm to be to protect workers. And as I said at the beginning, I'm not against technology, and of course I'm not against business, of course not. Actually, I was telling to my colleague from the Commission that I really believe that technology is really good. As I say it, I am a techno-optimist, and just looking history, for example, for Ford Dreams, for the factory, at the beginning, it was a very bad place for workers, and people were dying at the end of the 19th century on a factory. People were dying, but as a society, we decided not to ban, not to prohibit factories, but to regulate them. Thanks to factories, thanks to business, we have a car. Everyone has a car. A family on the Occidental world, everyone can buy a car thanks to factories, Fordies, etc. So the thing was positive, but there were some issues, like, for example, of course, health and security issues inside the factory. And the law regulate that to avoid these problems and to allow factories to do their job, which is doing cars very cheap, which I think it's quite a good thing. And algorithm is the same. There are a lot of voices trying to forbid algorithms because they discriminate, because they are a peril to the health of workers. And I think it's not necessary to forbid them. What we need is to regulate them. And I think it's possible to program. We need to program an algorithm to take into account all the safety measures, and then we have to audit the algorithms in order to make an assessment or evaluate the algorithm that it's good, has a good programming. So I think it's possible, and I think we should start as soon as possible to make this regulation in order to make algorithms safe for workers. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, one of the key messages of our forthcoming campaign on digitalization, I mentioned it earlier, is artificial intelligence as a support to human-centered, transparent, healthy and safe approach to management of workers, is built on workers' participation, consultation and trust. Now, I'm assuming you agree with that. You do? You're nodding. Yeah. So the question is, when we're told that in several sectors there is strong intensification of work, and do you accept this increase in work intensification?
Well, when it comes to work intensification, I think the picture is it's not homogeneous.
Yeah.
Because if you take some decades, then you will see overall, of course, there is the exact opposite of intensification of work. We basically all work less than people did many years ago. Our working lives are more extended, so the picture is quite diverse. In a lot of sectors also, you see the same. You see within a sector, between companies, you see also differences in work intensification or not. For example, during the COVID crisis, which was at the same time also an economic crisis, those companies who were largely depending on a consumer market and were not able to allocate costs, extra costs imposed by the crisis. If you were not able to charge them through, what can you do? The only thing you basically can do to survive then is, intensify work and work more and harder. Those companies who had an escape route and who could charge all the costs, the extra costs to the end consumer, whether that now was a professional or a professional client or a private individual, of course, they could continue with a kind of business as usual scenario. So, and even within jobs between people, intensification is also diverse. I'm still basically in the same job that I started, now I have to calculate, more than 30 years ago. Work for me has intensified enormously, but basically I still do exactly the same things. If you're new to a job and you're told, yeah, you're now part of that council, you should go there, you have to write a newsletter to our members, but as soon as your network expands, your knowledge expands, your work intensifies. And that is not bad, of course, because it drives me, it motivates me. I guess it's the same for a lot of people. So if you change a job, you start new. Then you have the stress of being a newcomer and have to learn again. But after 1 year in that new job, you will see your work will intensify because you know more, you know all the tricks of the trade, your network is expanding. Clients that you did not know before are now reaching out to you, colleagues that you didn't know before are reaching out to you. So yeah, there is no, we're not all in, if it were a time capsule, your career, we would all be in different points in time. So I don't think you can say work intensifies as a general statement. It is a case-by-case approach, and that is why I said we have those processes in dialogue with management and workers, where you follow up on people's tasks, the workload, their skills, but also, let's not forget that, the aspirations of individuals. Some individuals want to become a real expert, some want to become more how do you say that, generic view on things. Some want to lead a team, others just want to be focused on their job and bring their job almost to a level of perfection. So there is no general statement possible, and we do have in dialogue, we have the tools and the instruments to make sure that the balance is always there. I gave you in the past presentations about balancing between the individual with his capacities, aspirations and values, balancing the individual with the work situation throughout your career. And that is still my starting point, and I do think that AI and algorithmic tools can assist us, and I strongly believe that an augmented workforce, where the workforce is assisted by digital tools, it's helpful. Let's also not forget the number one basic prevention principle of the Framework Directive, reduce risk or eliminate risk at source. That does mean that in some situations we will eliminate, between brackets, the worker from that hazardous situation. We're not going to send people to measure chemical substances or a vapor cloud. We're not going to send in people if we have a remote device or a robot to do that. We're simply not going to do that anymore, so that means those people in that task that did that hazardous job in the past are replaced. But at the same time, new jobs are created. The problem is we never know what will be the jobs of the future. We do know the jobs that are likely to be impacted. That is a very uncomfortable situation for everybody, but that's the reality, and that is also prevention. If we can substitute people in hazardous work, in hazardous situations, by technology, we have to do so. Basic principle of the Framework Directive. But again, that is not done overnight, and that is done after a dialogue with procedures, with assistance by the Health and Safety Committee, external experts, etc. That is why the dialogue processes are there for, and that is, I think, was the key element of your question. So I strongly believe that also in the future, this has to be a jointly managed, discussed social dialogue process.
I think with this labour intensification question, I should come back at least a moment to Marianne to let you, and I'll come over to you because I saw your hand up there earlier. Would you like to say something about that? Because it strikes me that we're here talking about, again, still we're talking about the high prevalence of MSDs and the high prevalence of psychosocial risks. So do you have a different view on that, Marianne?
Surprisingly, I do. Yes, I mean, I think we need to concentrate on the topic of the panel, and that is algorithmic management. And the question is, does algorithmic management intensify work? There, from the study that we did on platform work, it is totally clear that it does. And why so? I mean, even the advantages that are being mentioned for platform work are actually not advantages. It's being said that, oh, platform work, it's so convenient because you can choose your tasks, you can choose your working time, etc., etc. But the algorithms are programmed in such a way that the platform worker has to be online all the time to collect his tasks. So he's alert all the time on different platforms collecting his tasks, and then search pricing or favorite pricing in search moments makes him or her jump on the tasks even more. And this is not something that I make up. It's what platform workers themselves express as problems. So intensification of work. To put it in a broader perspective, I think that technologies do intensify work. And I don't know, I use the example sometimes of when we were back in time and when there was no internet. Do you remember? I mean, I worked at the university and I had a pigeonhole. And in that pigeonhole, there were maybe 2 letters a day, and then maybe a newsletter once a week, a magazine. And when I had to do a research, I looked up what I had to collect, and I went to the library to collect it. So no internet whatsoever. Then at some point, email came. I think it is totally undeniable that email intensified our work enormously. And maybe back then it was still moderate. When it came, there was not so much email. But I'm sure that most of you nowadays experience an overload of email in their boxes. And we don't even know what to answer and what not to answer. So email is the next step of intensification. And then another step is Zooming. People are watching us online. We are now here in the afternoon. I think many of you also have planned a Zoom meeting. Maybe some of you have even planned a Zoom meeting during this summit. So intensification of work. So I do think that we face an intensification of work, and I really think we should take it seriously. I mean, to some extent it may be inevitable, but to what extent do we accept the prevalence of work-related mental diseases to rise? That's an important question.
Okay, thank you very much, Marianne. Nader, you wanted to come in there, didn't you?
Yes, about labor intensification, I had some comment and Chris. Of course, there are different views and different evidence about the work intensification. And in reality, somewhere it is intensified and somewhere not. But what I want to emphasize is that we should have respect and take it into account the subjective feelings and experience of the workers when they feel that the work has been intensified. Maybe it's not just the work intensification, maybe it's the symptom of something else, of losing control over their work situation, or feeling powerlessness, or not knowing what's going on, why do we have it, how does it function. So as you mentioned, this is the psychosocial aspects of the work environment we are talking about. So that's why we are emphasizing that it's very important that we should adopt a holistic perspective And with development and implementation of artificial intelligence and algorithms, social partners should play a very important role. So that social partners, together with developers and users, they decide what is going to be done, why and how does it function, actually. And also the question of awareness among the developers is very important, because now it's very specialized in the technology and research. So most of these technological developers, they just see their field. They don't see the broader perspective.
Yeah.
We should adopt a holistic perspective and see the whole picture, and also raise the awareness among these developers.
Thank you very much for bringing in this very important point. Now we have a question over here from the audience. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. And first, Brenda, as a professional ergonomist, I'm very pleased to hear you refer to the human-centred issue as a key thing. And I have a question for any of the panel members who'd like to answer. Is there a risk that instead of artificial intelligence being a tool for the worker, that situation is flipped over and the worker becomes a tool for the artificial intelligence? And that puts a completely different perspective on things and shifts the position of the worker and the human from that central position. And is that a risk?
Okay, who would like to answer that? Yeah, Marianne, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's already the case to some extent. If we look at the platform worker, they express this feeling of just being a machine. So not human anymore. So being directed from and not having any say in the way they work, the road they choose, etc., etc. So I think it's already the case.
Yeah. And that's of course where the psychosocial factors start to kick in.
Thank you. Thank you. We've 3 more questions, so I'm going to move on. Thank you very much. The gentleman here, yes, go ahead.
Buenos días.
Yes, good morning. I represent health and safety for workers at European ports and harbors. As you know, harbors or ports are being robotized increasingly, and people are being replaced by machines. And this is not to improve or enhance the health and the safety of workers. This is being done to reduce the cost and increase the profits of companies. I think that the people in the room are working in companies to improve the working conditions of workers. And I believe that we cannot allow this to happen. When companies replace human beings with robots, we cannot say that this is done to enhance the health and safety of workers. If an excessive load or burden is very detrimental for workers, then we need to, of course, give him an exoskeleton to help him, not replace him. And we cannot, replace human beings with new technologies and argue that this is done to improve health and safety.
Yep. Yeah, okay, we had a bit of a problem there with lack of interpretation. Would anybody like to comment?
No,
Please.
Please.
Please. Yeah, I think it was here that we were talking about the substitution of workers by machines, and you were making a statement that this is something that should be avoided. Would you like to respond to that, Professor Tedoli?
Hablo como la pregunta ha sido en castellano, le contesto también.
Since you've asked in Spanish, I'll react in Spanish as well. Professor Tedoli says, it is true that we have a real problem. Of course, we need to specify when measures are taken to improve the health and safety of workers. This needs to be explained. And many times, algorithms and technologies are used and are used in order to improve the health of workers, but at the same time, these technologies are collecting data of workers that are used for other purposes. And as regards replacing humans, machines, there's a fine line here. The line is blurry. If we have, hazardous tasks, dangerous tasks, I believe that it's very positive that, we have robots doing those jobs, those tasks. But of course, how are we going to split the improvement in productivity, the gain in productivity? I believe that we are living a moment in time in which the automation of jobs is happening without distributing the earnings obtained as a result of the reduction in headcount. There's this study published by David Outard from the MIT, from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, that analyzes how many workers are replaced by a machine in a sector in the United States and in Germany. And the conclusions are as follows. The same piece of equipment in the same productive sector. When we introduce a new piece of equipment in the United States, 6 jobs are destroyed, and in Germany, only 2. What's the reason behind this? We're talking about the same sector, same piece of equipment. Why do we destroy 6 jobs in the U.S. and only 2 in Germany? This has to do with collective bargaining. In Germany, collective bargaining is very, very robust. And when a piece of equipment is introduced, the gain in productivity is negotiated and is split. The company, for example, is going to save on 2 workers, but the other workers would benefit from, reduced time work or lower intensity of work. But since in the United States we don't have collective bargaining, we are not splitting or sharing those productivity gains, and the company can save 6 salaries, and there is no compensation for the remaining workers. And this is a good example to illustrate that technology in steps as productivity, and this is very positive in history of mankind. Technology has helped us increase productivity. This is very positive, but, we need to put the focus on how we split those earnings, those gains. We need to ensure a more egalitarian distribution.
Gracias. I'd like to take one more question, and we're going to close then. Please go ahead with your question.
Thanks, Brenda. Actually, my question is nearly for everyone in the auditorium. How many of you have a smartwatch? And do you respond when you're told you're not walking enough today? That's a positive algorithm. I would also like to ask everybody in the auditorium, how many of you have checked an email today while you've been here listening? Did you do it for your benefit or actually for others' benefit? I know I did it for my benefit. So it's important to hear what we're hearing. The pace of change is enormous, and let us be in no doubt the pace of change is enormous. But it's important to balance positive stories to the negative stories, because so much of what we're learning in terms of digitalization will have a positive impact on our lives. We shouldn't let it rule our lives, absolutely. But tell that to your smartwatch the next time it tells you to get a move on. And the last comment I'll make in terms of the need to regulate. I don't dispute the need to regulate for something like this, but I've been on a working party since the summer of 2020, looking at a review of the workplaces, and I have colleagues on a similar working party looking at the review of the display screen equipment regulations, our directives. They've been around over 30 years. We still haven't managed to get them reviewed. It will be a number of other years. The pace of change is enormous. And to quote Justin Trudeau when he was speaking in a completely unrelated capacity in 2018, he said the pace of change has never been this fast and will never be this slow again. So don't be afraid, embrace it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you all for your questions. And okay, absolute, if it's a quick one, because then we're moving on. A quick one, please. Thank you.
Julia Nertilek from the Austrian Trade Union Confederation.
Thank you, Julia.
When we talk about professional relationships, we want to prevent better than better consequences. That's also what we tell our children when it's about, sexual education. So it's always better to be cautious than naive, and nevertheless, we want to stay optimistic. So that's all we work here about. It should be difficult to make participation in algorithms come true, but we work in this agency always with interdisciplinary thoughts, and also to integrate the knowledge of all parts in the company. So there are good things that we have to work for. They don't come by itself. So the burden for disease we want to keep low in the next years. And also, nothing is neutral. It's nuclear energy, it's asbestos. It can be good or it can be bad, so better we look before. And it's like with the framework directive, we have a frame where we paint picture, and the question is, how do we paint it? So for chemicals, it's substitution, and Charlotte and her department, they work on it. So we use a chemical that is less harming than the other one, and participation of the workers makes possible that the algorithms are less harmful and that we can prevent something happens. So we have in the framework directive the specialists for medicine and for technique, and we also will use them. And OSHA is our vehicle, I think, to make a clear vision of what will happen. And so I think dialectic is a good way. We say this is one opinion, this is the other opinion, and then we find a good way in the middle. So my question to Charlotte would be, what will the framework directive be in 2032? How can we guarantee that the challenge that the law is neutral, but on the same time precise to work on the problems we have? Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. No pressure there, Charlotte.
Yes, we have the afternoon, yes, and the evening, yeah. Yeah, thank you very much, Julia. I wish I'd had a crystal ball, but I don't. But if I look at how legislation has developed generally at the EU level, for sure it has not been a straight line. We have the framework directive that lays down the basis. In some areas, there have been individual directives developed. In other areas, there have been rather guidances. And let's not forget that we also have to take into account the legislation developed close by, like the act I was mentioning on artificial intelligence. We have a lot of examples also on the chemical sides, the machinery directive. All these other pieces of legislation also regulate areas very close to health and safety at work. And I think maybe I would like to finish, it's a nice way to finish. OSH is almost everywhere. And I think that we are all ambassadors in this room, also online, to recall the importance of integrating, of streamlining OSH, not only in our little group, but when it goes beyond, and to make sure that the workers' rights are protected in the workplace, but also taken into account all the close-by areas that are also very, very interlinked.
Well, on that balanced note, I'd like to call this panel to an end and thank very much our participants. I think they did a very good job. I'd also like to thank a special thank you to our keynote speaker, Professor Todoli, for coming all the way from Valencia and for being with us today. And you can all take your seats now and go back to the normal life. And we'll move into the closing session. Thank you very much.